When the white people came, there was an agreement and conditions between our people and the settlers that they would walk together, not as father and son, but as brothers. There's equality in there, and that they would each row their boats together in one direction, but always respecting each other's differences, always respecting each other. And as a result, Native people have followed that, whereas the other hasn't.
We must know and understand what facts and causes, what successes and failures of yesterday brought about the good and the bad of today. Too often, our agencies, both political and private, have failed to examine with objectivity their efforts and results, and have perpetuated the headaches they seek to remove. What is needed is new thinking economically, socially, and politically to cure these problems. In some cases, maybe thinking for the first time.
In the winter of 1992, the Ontario Native Employment Equity Circle and Management Board Secretariat jointly sponsored a conference entitled Honoring the Difference. The purpose of the conference was to explore the difference between Native culture and the Ontario public service culture, and to create a setting where the difference could be celebrated.
One of our brothers in the Manitoba legislature.
And I do think it important that we keep in our minds throughout the next number of years one of the most important words in my language, the English language, which of course is tolerance. Because we're going to have to exercise a great deal of it, one with the other, over the coming years.
And I think we should not be satisfied with tolerance, because tolerance means I can stand you. And I think you have to do more than just stand me. You've got to accept me and accept those differences.
For years, people like you in the civil service have been doing to us and for us, never with us.
I guess part of our message is that we, First Nations people of the world, we have some answers. We have some values that will make this world last a long, long time.
The conference stemmed from concerns about the involvement and treatment of Native people within the OPS. Most are hired on a contract basis, and very few are in supervisory or management positions. Instead, they are limited to the clerical, service, and maintenance sections of the government.
I found out that there were approximately 1,000 Native people working for the Ontario government, but and that number sounded good, but what I found out was that almost 2/3 of that number were employed by the Ontario Public Service and working what we would consider below the poverty line.
Really, employment equity is a partnership, in that employment equity for First Nations cannot happen in the OPS unless the first line managers, the line managers, are involved in the process and in the dialogue and in the understanding.
It doesn't mean that we should lay off a whole mess of people so we can rehire people of the targeted groups. You know, the general public thinks that I've heard it come, I wish I was an Indian. Man, I'd have a job tomorrow, you know. And that's not so. There's many of us Indians don't have jobs tomorrow and may not have jobs tomorrow. There are many of us Native people who are working at levels that we could be above yet.
Going back to check Nimitz Lake.
Would you mind sending this letter?
Even though employment equity represents a strong stand by government, it is not enough. Misunderstanding about what employment equity really means has become a new stumbling block.
employment equity label is fine for applying for a position, but coming in and filling position and being identified throughout the position as an employment equity person does cause animosity amongst co-workers.
Being a member of a minority group, there are suspicions that, or even suggestions that perhaps you're going to get a better job because you belong to a minority group, not because of experience, not because you're good at what you do, but because you hit 2 target groups. And so therefore you're going to have an easier time getting a better paying job. And that's ridiculous.
If you wanted an employment equity to work within OPS, work with the Aboriginal people, not around them. Walk together, because you'll learn more walking with someone than walking in front or behind.
Producer Joe Beardy came to work at the Ministry of Natural Resources Communication Services branch in 1990. His relationship with his immediate supervisor was very positive right from the beginning.
Basically, I guess through the years, been kind of working by myself, and it kind of hard on a person. And I asked Lloyd, and basically told him, if I do get this job, will you be there with me to help me with the stuff that I need to do, you know, like bouncing ideas and stuff like that. And basically, I guess the answer from it was, yeah, we will work together. Yeah, I think there are a lot of times that we, not only in terms of working together and solving work problems or supporting each other's work and whatnot, it was more or less, you know, personal problems that we went through, that we'd sit together and just talk. And I think that kind of help is just as important.
A completely inclusive atmosphere in the OPS, where employees from different cultural backgrounds are encouraged to share their unique talents, is an ideal to strive for. The benefits of full acceptance could be endless. Problems can be easily solved when approached from different perspectives. The major threat to the experience of cultural sharing, however, is fear.
Non-native managers, and I guess what we would call the white able-bodied white males, they have a lot of concern about employment equity, and they're concerned about their children who may not have the same job opportunities when they go into the workforce. I mean, statistics point out to us that the white able-bodied male is not having any difficulty getting into the Ontario Public Service, but there's that perception that they do.
There's a fear that my job is in jeopardy because this Indian fellow or this woman or this disabled person or this visible minority is going to come on and he's going to get special treatment that I won't have. And a bit of a jealousy arises, and it creates a tense situation in the workplace.
The part what was difficult, I ran into a stigma attached to coming into this job through employment equity is, I had met qualifications, otherwise they wouldn't have hired me. I met certain standards for an environmental officer. It doesn't matter to me, but other people, like in the peers in the job, like they will automatically come up to you the first chance they get and they'll say, what's your education background? Because that seems to be what's important to them.
Over the years, the issue of degrees and diplomas versus work experience has been an ongoing problem in the workplace. Credentialism has been used to exclude Native people from better paying jobs.
Well, the thing is, I am not an educated person. I have worked with the feelings or the guidelines, the common sense that I have is what usually guide me in what I've done in my life, and I depend on that, and I wasn't out to become anything. What knowledge I had was of my own knowledge, or learned as I was growing up in life.
Tim Esquega was employed by the government for 21 years as a school caretaker. When his job became redundant, he was offered employment elsewhere in Ontario. But he chose to remain in his own community and to work on improving conditions there. He now owns and operates a successful forestry operation, which employs 25 to 30 people from the community.
In 1972, I became a chief, and then I wanted to look at other economic base for people in a community. We've seen people working on the outskirts or the boundaries of our reserve, cutting pulp, and I kind of was mad or felt bad because people in our community didn't have that right to be able to work and be able to sustain their own livelihood. The thing I feel that Native people should be given a right to make their own mistakes, not be judged before they are given, Some people will say, oh, they're Indian people, they're not going to make it. But I'd like to be given a right to make my own mistakes, and if I do, then I can say, you were right, But they are not right.
Success in competitions frequently depends upon the subtle communication signals that are specific to the dominant culture. In job interviews, the actions of the candidates are always taken into consideration, and when those actions are not typical, they can be misunderstood. Aboriginal people raised in a traditional environment can be seriously disadvantaged by such misunderstandings.
As Anishinaabe people, you do a lot of listening, and you do quiet listening. And silence drives the non-native population crazy. If you are not interrupting them, or if you're not leaning forward, like opening your mouth to jump in there and say something, it upsets them, like they don't know how to react to silence while you let them speak. And I found that in my jobs, like people, I guess, assumed that I wasn't interested because I wasn't talking all the time, or they thought that I was maybe dumb. I wasn't picking up on what was going on.
I can imagine a lot of people from my background having Native people involved in decision making, coming to the conclusion that, well, they're not participating, they're not involved. I haven't heard a word from them. Instead of saying, why don't they get involved, the better question really is, why do they choose not to be involved in the fashion that I'm used to? It's a very different kind of question.
Rupert Ross is the Assistant Crown Attorney for Kenora District. He serves the remote fly-in communities of northwestern Ontario, where 80% of his clients are Native. Having been raised in southern Ontario, he was surprised to suddenly be immersed in an entirely different culture, one where his ideas of justice and communication were foreign. He found himself having to adapt his way of thinking, his methods of communication, and even the physical layout of the courtroom. He has documented his experiences in a book he's written called Dancing with a Ghost.
It's the story of all the things that I was wrong about when I first went into the North, the things that I misinterpreted, and then slowly how I started to see the real scope of culture that was behind the behaviors I was seeing and the behaviors I was misinterpreting all the time.
Native people are very
to me, seem withdrawn. We're very shy, we're quiet, we don't say much, but many are very qualified. But because we don't speak up and maybe brag about our qualifications, maybe we're overlooked.
It never ceases to amaze me that the major problem between us is just one of misunderstanding. It's simply that, nothing more.
You simply misinterpret what you see. You don't know what's really going on, and you usually misinterpret in a way that you come to a negative conclusion about other people. So education is essential.
Pertaining to the matters in question will be the truth.
We have to re-educate ourselves and re-educate each other. And by re-educating, we have to go back to our spiritual teachings. We have to go back to the original teachings that the Great Spirit had given to each and every one of us, all the four races, because we are interconnected, and our interconnectedness is our spiritual teachings. We all have that within us.
In the past, trying to incorporate dominant culture values into the Native community has been totally unsuccessful. History has shown that these attempts have resulted in disaster for Aboriginal people.
I think, frankly, that the contribution of the dominant society is not to bring programs, but to make resources available so that programs designed by people from the communities can actually be put in practice.
Unless you have consultation with Native people, that's the only way it'll work. Unless you have something that has been developed by Native people and for Native people. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
There are non-Native people who not only accept that differences exist between the cultures, but who also believe that something can be learned from these differences.
The one who really let me walk beside him was Charlie Fisher. He's an elder from the White Dog Reserve, and he was the Justice of the Peace, conducting many of the courts that I was involved in. So for about 4 years, I guess, Charlie and I traveled around the north, and Charlie teaches and shows you things in a much more traditional fashion. He doesn't lay them out. He never tells you what to say or what to think or how to look at something, but he guides you into situations where, if you're watching, you can learn, and if you've missed it, he'll find some way that the information can come to you where you can see what you've missed.
Historically, the Native people has always been willing to share, and also willing to listen to other people. You need to have respect for the person that you're meeting with. You need to have respect for the people that you have to work with. You know, it's not a situation where one is higher than the other one, you know, but they're all equal.
As I understand traditional community governance, if you will, it was a governance that did not have a hierarchical structure to it, where certain individuals were put in positions of power and they could then tell other people how they were going to live and what they were going to do.
That's a sign of a good leader, is to be able to go as fast as the slowest person on your team. And when you go all together, you know, that you bring your people, or you bring your staff with you, all going at the same level, same speed, and you get a lot more done, instead of having one or two people that are more advanced, but then you don't have any support system available for that person.
If we can start understanding, if the white people or the government people can understand what our feelings are, where we're coming from, our background, and the reason why we talk the way we do, the way we look at things, then we can have a better communication, and we'll cut down the number of years or the time it's going to take so that we can all work together and, for the better of all people in this province. And I'm not praising up Native people that they know more. I'm just saying that they have something to offer this country. All I know is they should be given a chance to make their contribution to society. And they would make a good contribution. I sincerely believe that.
Encouraging changes are happening within various ministries to accommodate cultural differences. Co-management agreements, partnerships with First Nations, the recognition of Native self-government, and attempts to fuse cultural law into the justice system are improving communication between the government and First Nations people.
If you talk about it and try to work it all out so that everything's perfect, nothing will ever happen. We have to work and do and experiment, make mistakes, take chances, but that doesn't happen.
We often talk about the cultures of the OPS and then the cultures of the First Nations. In fact, both, when you really look at it, in most cases, have some very fundamental values that really run across both cultures.
I think a lot of goodwill is there if people can start to understand that behind other people's actions from different cultures is liable to be a whole sophisticated complex of notions about what's proper in relationships between people and people and their institutions, and relationships between people and the universe around them. And that it's exciting to explore somebody else's culture.
It is often said that this land has a short history. In fact, it has a glorious heritage, a heritage with traditions that are worth keeping. What will it take for the Native culture to be accepted by the dominant society?
Because democracy, in the British style of government, which is how the OPS works and how the Ontario government works, has been one which has been based on a form of adversariality, but always in the knowledge that compromise was there as an out. And maybe we will have to learn from cultures, and I'm talking about our form of government, to exercise different forms of getting together, of talking, of dispute resolution, of working out the problems.
I'd call where we are now just a beginning of a long process, one that's encouraging at the moment, but just the beginning.
I think that there will be a day when the system honors our way.
Because as we go into the western doorway, when we go into the light, we will be looking back at our moccasin tracks, and we will see what kind of tracks we have made. Because I want those tracks to be good and solid for my grandchildren and the unborn generation.
I wonder what would happen if Canada would accept us, would be aware of us as Indians, would accept us as a people, would share with us pride in our heritage, for it is Canada's heritage also.
Hey,